Ron, thank you very much for coming back on The One in the Many. And we are continuing the discussion of your book, Masculine Power, Feminine Beauty. And this is, let me get it on the camera. Do you see it? Yeah, there you go. Masculine Power, Feminine Beauty, the Volitional Objective Basis for Heterosexuality and Romantic Love and Marriage, by Ron Pisaturo. Ron, it's great to have you back. And as as you mentioned off camera, you wanted to follow up on the last discussion we had on masculinity and femininity with a few more points, and then we'll go into the subject of marriage as we offered as a promise to the audience for this episode.
Okay. Well, Arshak, thank you very much for having me back. And
Thank you.
I listened to the recording from last time. And yeah, I noticed just a couple of things. First, a detail. I said that Charlie Lau was not a good hitter. And I should not say that. I should say he was not a great hitter.
Right.
After all, he was in the major leagues, and anybody to get to the major leagues has to be a good hitter, right? And he was about average for a major league hitter. But he was known as a great hitting coach. One of his famous students, George Brett, was one of the best hitters of his time. So that's one detail. Then another thing that occurred to me was I talked about how a woman should be admired for her beauty because beauty is something that every woman is born with as a potential, but it takes work to exploit that potential, right? To be fit, to be graceful and, well-groomed, well-dressed and all that kind of thing. But one thing I wanted to add to that is that also, or another way of looking at that is it takes courage. And one aspect of that is that a beautiful woman is a target. She's of course of appeal to many men, and it's appealing to good men, a man that she wants, but it's also appealing to bad men, men who will try to take advantage of her. And, sadly, there are some women who have experience of attention from men, from bad men, and have bad experiences. And after that, they choose not to be beautiful because they don't want that bad attention, And again, it takes courage to be out there with your virtue of beauty because you are going to be a target. And all the more reason that a beautiful woman and a desirable woman needs a good man to defend her against so many bad men. You're nodding. Do you have
I was going to say this is a good point because women know very early on how beautiful they are. And they know that they're attracting a lot of attention from men. So they have to develop that sense of who is good for them and who is not. Otherwise, they expose themselves to potential danger. And the more they take care of themselves, the more open they are to potential threat. So this is a good point that you're bringing up, that it takes courage and it takes refinement of their judgment.
And again, it takes more courage for a man who wants a desirable woman knows that she's going to be a target,
Mm.
and he has to be even better prepared
Yeah.
to defend her because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, well, I was, I mean, like you, in the book, you say that you were 5 year old when you um, sense and remember that sensation of an attraction to a girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was 5 years old, I actually stole one of my mom's golden rings, and offer it as a proposal to my neighbor who was a 5 year old. So I thought I'm married to her. So we would go to her bedroom and we'll set up the dolls as our kids and we'll imagine what kind of house we're going to build and how we're going to live and all this stuff. And all of a sudden I realized that her mom knocks on my mom's door and says, does this belong to you, by the way? Yeah, okay. Well, your son gave it to my daughter. And that was the end of my marriage life with a 5 year old, as a 5 year old. Um,
It's
but
funny.
one thing I remember how attracted I was to her, and how beautiful
Mm.
I thought she was, and I was 5 year old kid, and so these were fun memories that I have, and I have some pictures um, to remind me of those experiences. So
Mm.
that was fun thing.
Mm.
But since from age 5 until I became a young adult, I never really reflected on marriage until I met the woman that I fell in love with, and that's when I
Mm.
started thinking about marriage. So these are good points that you're making. Is because even as a child, um, I remember that sense of feeling protective of the girls that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that they're protected, that they are not exposed to outsiders who may wish them ill. And it was natural. And nobody taught me that. Nobody told me you got to go after
Mm-hmm.
girls that you like.
Mm.
That's interesting.
Well, young boys often learn an analog to that when they have to protect their little sister, right?
Right. If you have a little sister, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In my case, it's three boys in the family. So we don't have sister to protect. But my older brother was acting as a protector of the younger brothers. So
Mm-hmm.
I felt that protection from him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So a couple of other things that I wanted to say is, I'm talking about women being beautiful, and someone might wonder, well, not every woman can be beautiful, because then what standard is there if everybody is beautiful? And I think it's important to understand that when I say beautiful, I don't mean a woman is beautiful in comparison to other women.
mm,
There's gonna if you have a group of women, some are going to be more beautiful physically than others. Um, the, a woman should be the most beautiful thing in the man's environment. So a woman's beauty is in comparison to, the harsh elements of the world, and the furniture and the food and the clothes, all the things that are in a man's environment. There are some beautiful things, but the pinnacle of beauty, in my judgment, for a man is the woman in his life. And in that respect, the woman is beautiful, or if she strives to exercise her potential for beauty, and that's the reward to a man. And you hear so many times that a man will describe his wife as beautiful. A
Right.
speaker, beginning his remarks saying, "Oh, my beautiful wife is in the audience today," or "I'm grateful for my beautiful wife." It's such a common thing for a man to say about his wife. You rarely hear a woman say, "My handsome husband," that
Right.
way. I mean, she might say it in passing, and a woman reasonably wants a husband who's handsome, but that virtue is not fundamental or foundational the way it is to a man, wanting, deserving, and enjoying the beauty of the woman in his life.
So my wife may not qualify to become Miss Universe, to the objective judging eyes of a commission that decides who the Miss Universe will become among, I don't know, 100 or 200 women out there competing for that title. But to me, she is the universe. It's a very beautiful universe. And that's the way that you're delegating this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, in that respect, my standard of beauty definitely reflects on the person that I fall in love with. And it varies from man to man. And it also varies in different time periods, right? In the 1920s, women looked differently than the women in 2020. And there were different standards that men developed to show what they consider beautiful next to them. But that also, that beauty radiates through the grace and charisma that you read in somebody's demeanor, not just the physical aspect of the symmetrical proportion or harmony of the body and so forth that we consider as beautiful. So, so that's, I guess, an aspect of your chapter of volition and emotion, the way you interact with a person on an emotional level, but that emotion that you have an automatic reaction to the interaction you are experiencing with the person. It's based on some prior evaluation that is conscious and thought out and explicit, and then eventually it turns into a automatic reaction that you could analyze. But I guess many people don't analyze; they just react to it and go with the flow of their emotions. So it could be positive and negative, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, going with the flow is not a bad thing if it is in conjunction with thinking, you know,
Right.
and if it's consonant with your explicit values.
Mm.
And one thing related to that idea is about beauty. You know, I consider the beauty of the woman not as a standalone entity, but as part of a couple, right? So when I was a young boy, I would not want to, or let's say a young man, I would not want to be paired with a 50-year-old woman.
Right.
It's for spiritual, intellectual, mental reasons, but also for aesthetic reasons. It's not a harmonious picture, right?
Yes.
And the same now that I'm almost 70, it's not a harmonious picture to be with someone in her 20s, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not just, again, it's not just the woman alone. It's how it forms a couple, and or how she is forms a couple. And that also means that the values that you hold as a man are going to be values that you're going to admire in the woman. If the man is graceful in his movements, he's going to admire that kind of grace with the woman to complement that, or even to exceed his own grace, right? And if the man has certain other features, it's nice to have the woman complement those as well, you know. So that's all pointing to a harmony of values and complementarity and shared virtues, right? That change over time and evolve over time.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. And it is that sharing of values, of virtues, of that emotional connection that generates the deeper connection between the two that eventually um, permeates in a future contract that we are going to discuss in terms of marriage, right?
Yeah.
And but the question is, why do people marry? Why can't they
Oh.
live
Mm-hmm.
just as a couple? Why do they marry?
Mm. That's a great question. And that relates to one more, a fourth thing that I was,
I
I
forgot to put
wanted
it
to,
in.
that
Yes.
that I remembered that I wanted to say from last time,
Yes.
because I did not have a good answer for that question when I lived in New York and California, right?
Yes.
So marriage was not so important to me. And, you know, when I say that, I also don't want to imply that I'm innocent. You know, I was just taken in by the bad ideas in those places like Pinocchio or something like that, you know, and I, you know, mea culpa. So I did not have the wisdom to think past the mistakes of the people, most of the people around me. And it's not that everybody around me made that mistake. People did get married and have families around me, and women in my age range, once they got into their early 30s, did want to have children. You know, they did. Many of them did not want it earlier, but many of them came to want it later. But I could have known, I should have known that New York and California don't constitute the whole world. And uh, it was possible for me to discover how important marriage was. So I just wanted to say that, to say that I'm not trying to pass off all the blame. I was influenced by the influences around me, but I also lacked the wisdom to see past those influences, right? And so the why marry thing question um, also, well, it's so important and valuable, essential for someone to have what I call in one of the appendices of the book a constant spiritual companion, right? And this is why we want to have just one partner at a given time, but it's also why we want to have one romantic life partner throughout one's life, because it gives that continuity, right? That you can answer this question better than I, right? But how irreplaceable is it to have another soul that you admire more than any other soul as a constant companion over a long duration of your life, all the way to the end,
Yeah.
right? So you have that judge, that evaluator, who can say, I've observed you over many decades, and I love you even more and more through those observations, you know, and you just have so
Very
much
rewarding.
more to share. Yeah, it's a greater reward, um, and in both directions, right? I mean, how, you know, if certain individuals are so valuable and deserving of high value, well, it's clear, it's obvious that you want to have that person of such high value with you for as much as your life as possible, for as long as possible, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why you want permanence, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. I agree that especially when you find the one, right? The one that you are in love with, the one that um, has judged you, and you have judged in return, right? You have um, well, you bring up this issue, this point in your chapter on volition and emotion. You quote Ayn Rand about that sense of life. That sense of life meets another sense
Mm-hmm.
of life, and that sense of life is metaphysical level emotional response to somebody else. Um, so when you encounter that, when you find your
Mm-hmm.
soulmate, you don't want to let go. You can't let go, right? And especially
Mm-hmm.
when the response is positive, that yes, they acknowledge that they are your soulmate, and you in return are their soulmate or her soulmate in my case. So when that happens, um, I mean, nothing can separate you, right? Until
Mm-hmm.
death we part, or whatever the term was there. But and so I guess the way we structured modern life, um, we do these marital contracts not only for ourselves to show the commitment to ourselves, but we also have to do it in a sense for the government to acknowledge us as a unit, as a family, to treat us tax-wise as a family, as a married couple, to be able to legitimize our offspring if we have one. There are a lot of legal issues involved with a couple living um, as a married couple.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking was, if if those socioeconomic reasons take priority, then maybe you're not with the right person. Right? First has to come the person. I mean, if you rise independent above the law, beyond financial restraints or anything like that, will you still be with that person? That's pretty much how would you find out, I guess, from a political standpoint, whether that's the right person for you. So, in my experience, it doesn't matter what our status is, but I know that my wife and I will be together no matter what, whether we're going to be homeless or live in a mansion, we're going to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And that permanence. gives you the security of your soul. You know, you found yourself, you found your loved one, and that loved one becomes the most important person in the world, right? I mean, my mom kind of alluded to this when I was getting married, when I told her that I found my wife, and this is going to be my wife, and I want my grandma gave me a ring when I was a little kid, and she said, "This is going to be the ring for your wife. Whenever you find her, you give her this ring." So my mom kept it for me, and when I told her I found the one and I want the ring to give it to her, she said, "Okay, well now you're a man. Now you're a man on your own." I mean, I was already on my own, right? So I was living by myself in America before they arrived, but in her estimate, now you're a man. Now you found your wife. Now you're going to start a family. Now you're independent of us. And I no longer care for you as my son. You know, you're out of the family now. So that was interesting that, you know, be careful who you find, because even your mom is going to say, you no longer belong, you now belong to that woman. So that was interesting for me in my experience. But I also think that as dearly as I love my mom, you know, my wife is the most important person in my world. I know my mom is, you know, much older, and eventually she'll die before me if everything goes according to nature. And I'm going to remain with my wife. So it's a very strong bond. That's what it comes. And but you go in a little more philosophical way of showing that the defense of marriage is also important on a epistemological cognitive level, right? And this is what I really appreciate in your book, how you develop the point that you develop the point that you become a defender of marriage. And I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit more about that. Like why do you think it's important to defend the concept of marriage?
For all the reasons we just said, a man needs to have this in the forefront of his mind. He needs conceptual understanding along with the emotion, right? Marriage is the most romantic word in the language. It denotes this unbreakable, lifelong bond between two constant spiritual companions, two people who think about each other almost all the time. When you have an experience, even when you're by yourself, you look forward to relating that experience to your wife when you see her, right? And marriage is the concept that captures all of that meaning. And it captures all the meaning of everything that I've said and you have said in our two interviews about the relationship between a man and a woman. And a man and a woman in particular, not some other relationship,
Right.
Between friends or between two men or whatever. Everything we talked about has to do with a deep romantic relationship between a man and a woman. And that's what the concept marriage is for. It's to hold all of that in one mental unit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I keep reading about ancient Greece, and it's amazing how much we are repeating from the past in our attitude towards that family life, and how we think that we can outsmart nature or the natural order of things. And I just wanted to read something from Durand. He says, as the state religion lost its hold upon the educated classes, the individual freed himself more and more from the old moral restraints. The son from parental authority, the male from marriage, the woman from motherhood, the
Mm,
citizen from political responsibility. End of quote. And I found that quote remarkable. That he observed that about Greece, and I think this
mhm,
is decent portrayal of what's going on right now in the culture. We are
mhm,
forgetting the authority of the parent. We are forgetting what it means to be masculine, to take care of the marriage. We're forgetting what it means to be a woman, to be a mother, and we're
mm,
forgetting what it means to live in a organized, civilized society with political consequences.
mhm.
So we have to be responsible for that. Um, and I mean, the dark side of the book, if I can call it this, it's dark for me. I couldn't stomach it. But you have to write this. You have to explicate the entire LGBT or whatever it's called movement. And kudos to you that you had the strength and the courage and the wisdom to be able to do it in the way you did. But I love the opening sentence that you present in when you start talking about the homosexuality, is that a homosexual couple cannot have kids, right?
Yeah.
So how important it is to have offspring for a marriage?
Arshak, I'm going to put on my Charlie Lau hat again here
Okay.
because I don't have children. And it is by far the greatest regret of my life. And possibly the reason I'm not married is because I did not want to have children when I was younger. And there were undoubtedly many eligible women in my age range who did come to want children, and I was not a fit, you know, prospect for a husband because I did not want to have children at the time, and it was lacking in wisdom on my part. And if I can uh, talk about personally how it's it's held me back. Um, I see how much joy that my friends now where I live get from their family, some reasonable joy. And when I was a young man, I accepted the premise that, well, I first have to make it in the world, right? I have to uh, establish myself in terms of having a certain amount of income and so forth before I could consider having a family, having a wife and children. And there's some plausibility to that because, frankly, when I started my business, I slept on the floor in my office for 5 years. I slept on a little blow up, not like these air mattresses we have now, but more like a one of those things that you put in the swimming pool. You blow up this little thing, and and I slept on that on the floor for 5 years,
Wow.
and it was a studio apartment, and my roommate slept on the sofa bed. My business partner, and our office, we had desks in there, and we had so little room, so little space that one time a friend missed the last train out of town for the night, and he had to stay over our place. And it took us about 20 minutes to find floor space for him to sleep on the floor. And finally, he slept like half his body was in the bathroom and half his body was, and it was like that little bump in the middle. And that's what we did. And the place I lived before that, or two places before that even, I remember a couple of friends came over in the middle of the night and needed a place to stay. And one guy slept under my sofa bed.
Wow.
So, you know, and I would say to myself, I can't expect a wife to go through that and have children in that situation, you know. But, you know, in retrospect, Arshak, what I learned from my friends in my new place is that having a wife and then even eventually having children, yeah, there's an expense involved, but it makes you more productive. It gives you the spiritual fuel. You know, some people might say, well, it makes you more responsible. Maybe that too, but it gives you the ability to be more productive. And I look back at all the professions that I had and go through them. After I worked just a few years to learn how to work in business a little bit, I started a private high school. And of course, if I had had my own wife and especially children, I would have been better at running a high school with kids. I did not know how to manage kids, you know, high school kids. So that was the first thing. And then I also was in theater. I was an actor. And if I had had a wife and children, that would have been so much more life experience to make me by far a better actor than I could have been on my own. I mean, how am I going to play a character who was a father? You know, where's my experience for that, my understanding? How could I play Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird? You know, I think when Gregory Peck played that role, he already had 5 children.
Wow.
And you know, so I'm just talking even about from the practical level, you know, and then I became a philosopher. And again, how much I could have learned about epistemology, about how people learn by observing my own children learn, how I could have learned more aspects of ethics about from the experience of having to be responsible for my children. You know, I think one drawback of the current state of Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism is that there's not much at all written about the rights of children, you know, and the responsibilities of parents, rights of parents and responsibilities of parents and the rights of children. And so few objectivists who are the leaders of that movement over the decades, few of them have their own families. You know, and
Ayn Rand herself didn't have any kids, and in her work, in her fiction, very little mention of children.
Yeah, and I have to think that if she had had her own children, that from time to time she would have written about the rights of children and the responsibilities of the parents toward children, and the relation of parents to the state and children to the state and children to the parents. Now, from what I've heard, I don't remember whether I read this somewhere, is that, you know, she made a conscious decision not to have children because it would have, in her judgment, detracted from her ability to devote the time needed to pursue her career as a novelist, you know. And I guess by the time she was a philosopher, she was already past the age of having children. But it's just a very unfortunate situation that she had to come from another country and was poor, right?
Yeah.
Or relatively, and had to struggle financially to have the time to write her great novels. So I'm not going to say she was wrong uh, to forego having kids, but I will say I think it's unfortunate that uh, she was in a financial predicament that made it very difficult for her to have kids. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
probably would have been better for her and for civilization today if she had been able to work fewer hours in the wardrobe department of a film studio and could have spent that time raising children. You
Yeah.
know, um, but so I don't know. So all that is to say that ironically, uh, I thought I was helping my career along by foregoing having a family,
Mm.
but in retrospect, I sabotaged my career.
Mm.
You know, now I think I've accomplished more than I ever expected to anyway, and I have had a very fulfilling life professionally and personally. I've had an unbelievably happy life. I think unbelievably. I say that word describing myself. I never knew this much happiness was possible to a human being when I was a child and a very young man.
Right.
So I've had a great life. Nevertheless, I judge that I would have had even a greater life
Yeah.
by a lot if
Yeah.
I had had children. And so it is my greatest regret. And again, I mean, I've written, so I have an article that I've drafted, that'll probably come out in a few weeks,
Mm.
about it's actually about abortion, but
Okay.
I cover some of the virtues of to a parent of having a child.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yeah.
that
I
was
mean,
a long answer. And I'll just mention one other thing. Um, my friend Brad Thompson, C. Bradley Thompson,
mhm.
is the one who impressed upon me the most the importance of having children as part of the concept of marriage. You know, so I'm very grateful to him for that, and I'm also grateful to him and to all my friends in Utah now where I live, where they really love their families, uh, to give me a chance to observe and experience secondhand the just absolute joy that people have from their children.
Yeah. I mean, I see it in my brothers. Like you, I don't have children. And in my case was a conscious decision. Um, and was not a condition, but basically both my wife and I had made a decision before we got married, before we met each other, that we're not going to have kids.
Mm.
And when we met and the issue came up, that was very satisfactory for both of us because um, you cannot marry someone who wants to have kids and you don't want to have kids.
Mm.
It just doesn't work, no matter how good of a match they are. Kids are that important. They're
Mm.
deal makers or deal breakers. It's just
Mm.
the pure desire to have or not have a child. But I can see it in my nephew and nieces when my brothers have their kids and I spend time with them. It's remarkable. It's very rewarding. It's amazing to have them in the family, and you can see the joy they bring to the parents, and the parents become so proud. And it's really fascinating. I mean, my nephew is 4 years old, and yesterday one of my brother's friends gave him a magic trick kit to play with, and he said, "This is too difficult for me. I need help." So the guy helped him set up the kit, and he showed him one of the magic tricks. And then he told him, "Okay, now you do it." And this is a 4-year-old, so he tried. He stumbled once or twice, and he succeeded at one trick. And he said, "Well, this is very difficult, and if I need help, will you help me?" He said, "Yeah, sure, anytime." He goes, "Yeah, but he said, my brother's friend said, 'Well, call me, I'll come and help you.'" And he said, "Well, I can't call you. I don't have a phone. I have to ask my mom to call you." And I said, "That's fine. Yeah, but what if my mom is busy and I cannot call you, and she cannot, you know, help me? Are you going to come from work to help me?" And he said, "Yes." He goes, "Oh, now I know that you really love me." Um, and so if a 4-year-old can show that kind of connection making between people, like what's important, what's not important, and it's contracting this deal with this guy that gave him something to do, and now he's conditioning on this activity, their relationship. I mean, it's amazing, right? As a parent, they're like, "Oh, my kid is so smart." This is remarkable to see in a kid. So you're constantly challenged by their surprises, but also you're working on maintaining that liveliness in them, right? You don't want to make them fall into some kind of resistance and hiding and all this stuff. You want them constantly being comfortable in their attachment, so to speak. So kids play a huge role, as you say. But in modern society, in today's society, there are very few people, very few families. I mean, I pretty much know none who don't outsource the raising of the kids. And that makes it inefficient and deficient and makes it unhealthy for kids. So,
That's the blue state way.
right. I mean, I live in a blue state, so
Yeah,
that's what I see around me. Like everybody's sourcing out the.
yeah. It's not the Utah way.
That's great that it's not the Utah way, because the natural way is you have kids, you take care of them. You
Yeah,
don't give it to somebody else to take care of your kids.
yeah. And there's a friend of mine who has 8 children.
Wow.
I think he's still in his 30s.
Oh my gosh.
And when you see him and his wife with their 8 children, it's a sight to behold, because they just handle it like, you know, like pouring a glass of water. It's just so, and the way they outsource is the oldest kid
Yeah.
takes care of the younger, the older ones take care of the younger ones. And when they have a place to go or something to do and the parents have to run somewhere, they'll have a quick meeting and say, okay, you have to do, you take care of these two, this and that. And they just handle it.
Yeah, that's a
And
division
it's
of labor.
no stress. What's that?
That's a division of labor within the family. That's not outsourced.
Yeah. And that's something that they've learned to do,
Yeah.
I remember I asked a friend of mine, I said, when I was back in New York, I would see a mother with one child in the supermarket, and she could not handle the one child, and the kid was making yelling and
Wow.
behavior problems and with that. And then I came to Utah, and I see parents, even a father, handling 6
Wow.
all the time. And I asked my friend, how do you guys do this? And he said, well, we learned it in church.
Mm.
You know, after the first hour of their sacrament meeting, then the men go off to a class to learn how to be a good husband and father, and the women go off to a class to learn how to be a good mother and wife. And sure enough, they do learn it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not to say that families there, everybody has to deal with issues, but it's handled so much better, and it's just so much genuine love that I. And you know, I could try, you know, in my article, I try to project what some of the values are that a parent gets from children, but I'm only guessing, you know, because I haven't done it.
Right.
I mean, I can read you what part of my guesses, but I also quote some other parents. I quote my friend Charlotte Cushman, and also you know, C. Bradley Thompson, in articles that they have published.
Right.
Or in the case of Brad Thompson, articles that he's published. But one thing I wrote, this is the best I could do, is having children is an adult's most thorough means to validate and transmit his wisdom to the next generation, and thereby to witness the further enduring fruit of that wisdom.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well said. And it strengthens that permanence, right?
Oh yes.
In a proper marriage relationship with proper raising of kids, it strengthens the permanence, because without kids, if you haven't found the one, you cannot survive in a relationship if there are no kids strengthening the permanence of your relationship. And it's not surprising that in a state as, I'm going to use the quote from ancient Greece, but as the state religion lost its hold upon the educated classes, right? And to me, the state religion here stands for the education system, for the moral standards of our society today, for the culture in general. So when the culture lost its hold upon the educated classes, we have 40 to 50% divorce ratio. Ratio in America, right? And what happens to all these kids that were born into those divorce couples? And so marriage is very important. It's sacred, and it has to be treated as sacred. You cannot take it lightly. It's not a casual affair. And then having a kid in addition to that very serious relationship, it's even more serious, because now it's not just you and your loved one. Now you're responsible for a whole life.
That's right.
And that's a huge, tremendous responsibility.
Yeah.
Kudos to a 30-year-old who has 8 kids. It's amazing.
What's that?
I was saying kudos to that 30-something-year-old that has 8 kids. It's
And you know, again, I'm going to sing the praises of my friend Brad Thompson, because he's also I recommend all of his writing. He's written, you know, he's a historian, and he's written wonderfully about the American Revolution, but he's also written beautifully about family life, children and parenthood, and you know, being a parent and a child of great parents. And I remember one thing he wrote, and I'm gonna not do it justice, but I'll just say this as, you know, as a commercial for anybody, a recommendation to read his book and his work, his writings. And one thing he wrote was that he fell in love all over again with his wife when he saw her teaching their children.
Yeah.
And it's one thing you don't know when you get married how your wife is going to be with the kids, right? And then when you see, oh my gosh, how wonderful she is, that's just a greater reward. And this is another thing I did not have the wisdom to grasp. When I thought about, oh my gosh, having kids, what a responsibility, it's going to take me away from all my professional goals. And I didn't have the wisdom to think, well, there's going to be a wife there with me.
Right.
It's a team effort. Not that means, oh, she's going to do it all. I mean, it's a team effort, and it's just another exalted, sacred project for the two of us to work on together, right?
Yeah.
To raise another soul. So it's another way. It's another way to get to know and love your romantic, soulmate.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the in today's context, when people, well, not in your states, but in the blue states, as you say, people around me. I'm in New York, right? So in New York, everybody's so busy, nobody has time for kids. Everybody gives the kids to somebody else. In that respect, that's exactly what you saying to the people around you. I am not confident that I can do this. All I'm confident of doing is going to my, job, and so long as I provide financially for my family, I'm okay in my head. And that kind of distorts the whole contract, the whole purpose of two people coming together to start a family.
Yeah.
And it results in disintegration and divorce. So again, it all emanates from that understanding of the masculinity and femininity that you so wisely describe and focus on. That and this, speaks back to the ancient world when they focused on, you got to know yourself, know thyself. I mean, people put it on stone on the temple's entrances. You have to know yourself to enter here. This is a sacred place. So you have to know yourself to marry. And Iran puts it in the voice of Howard Roark, saying, to say I love you, you have to know the I, right? So you have to know who you are and what it is that you love, who it is that you love. And saying I love you, it's not as easy. It's a very difficult thing. And so, but just to clarify on this distinction from your perspective. So what's wrong with two men or two women saying I love you to each other, knowing each other, and wanting to have the marriage? I mean, we touched on it, but I guess we should, now that we're talking more about marriage, we should go back just to clarify the point that this is only heterosexual relationship, right? It's not a homosexual relationship. It cannot be a homosexual relationship in terms of marriage.
Do you want me to get into that? I don't know. It's
well, I think just a little bit, you should. It's up to you if you want to say anything or not. But I just want to be clear that this is one of the messages that you're writing about, right? That it's a heterosexual marriage, belongs to man and woman. It doesn't belong to anybody else.
Yeah. I think I can accomplish that just by saying again, everything that we've spoken about in this session and the previous one has to do with the complementarity of a man and a woman. You know, a man is exerting his power in the world, and he wants then to express that power to a soul who will thrive on receiving that power and judge it. In my celebration of my life, I don't want someone else to be expressing his power onto me and making me feel weak or subordinate. That's not the celebration of life that I, as a man, want to experience. So, I mean, I could go into more detail, but frankly, I just don't want to put a downer on all this beauty that we're talking about.
Fair enough.
You know, and what I will say instead is to put things in as positive a light as I can. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if I said this last time or not, but it bears repeating. Actually, I don't think we did talk about this. An overarching theme of the book is to understand the values you hold that are consistent with your sexual orientation. And so I wrote about my values as a man and how that was consistent with my wanting to marry a woman. And by having that consistency, as Ayn Rand has written, that that's how you get the full joy of love, right? It's when you have an integration of your conscious philosophy and your emotional feelings. And remember I said about how if you understand why you love a woman, then the love becomes deeper, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I set out to do as a man who loves a woman and wants, a marriage. And so what I write as well is, whatever your sexual orientation, you should want to understand it, understand what values you hold that are consistent with your sexual orientation. If you really think your orientation is good for you, then understanding the integration of your values and your feelings will be even better for you. So I offer that goodwill challenge. I say, I know my values that are consistent with my sexual orientation. Do you understand the values that are consistent with yours? Right. You know, and I write, it's brought me a great deal of happiness, and that's what I encourage any of you to do as well. And if someone who, let's say, is homosexual, takes up that challenge and writes a book or an article or a passage even about how his values are consistent with his orientation, I say, good for you for doing that, and I would be interested in reading it. I don't think that there is a way for homosexuals to have as integrated and fulfilling a relationship as a heterosexual one, but I welcome the chance to be proven wrong, and that's not the fundamental motivation, for someone to prove me wrong. The fundamental motivation is, again, if you have this integration of philosophical conscious ideas and your emotions of love, it's going to be good for you. So you do it. So that's how I'd like to address that issue in this interview, as I've just done. to turn it into a positive thing that anyone, can benefit from that exercise.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Um, I wanted to also elaborate a little more on that issue of the sense of life. So that's
Mm-hmm.
quite abstract, um, but I'm gonna offer some of my experiences, how I read the sense of life
Mm-hmm.
in the person that I fell in love with, and then you can um, say anything you want about it, or elaborate more on the understanding of the sense of life. But one of the first things that struck me is reading confidence in the other, right? I mean, this doesn't apply only to the person that I fell in love with, but in general, when I can interpret what I see in one's demeanor as confidence, that to me speaks to the way they carry themselves and how they manifest their sense of life, whether they can go about the world and do it, as you said, just like pouring a glass of water, or without even thinking about it, just doing it and being successful at it. So the ability to execute tasks with confidence. And in addition, in my experience, in terms of my relationship with my wife, I also noticed that sense of generosity, which is um, an addition to that confidence or self confidence, because I haven't encountered yet a person who is generous and who is not confident in their abilities to produce so they can give again more. So those two go hand in hand. And then from it, there are, again, many more personal nuances that everybody has a different take on. You know, it's like somebody likes light blue, somebody likes a little darker blue, or dark blue, or navy blue, whatever it is. So it's a variation on the same theme, so to speak. And the personal preferences will vary, but there are fundamental issues in that sense of life understanding that speak in a deep fundamental sense about the person that attracts another person like that person to explore that attraction, so to speak. So that's how that's like a superfluous, more general my understanding of that sense of life idea.
Well, there's a lot to think about in what you said. I don't think I've ever thought of confidence as being a fundamental element of sense of life. But I could see how that's plausible in that part of a sense of life is it's an overall feeling that comes from a metaphysical value judgment, meaning a judgment about your estimation of the world, whether the world is auspicious to human life and in what way it is, right? And there's a kind of a confidence that comes from that, as in the sense that human beings are capable of survival and flourishing and happiness in this world, and they have a good chance of achieving all those things by being rational. So there's a certain kind of confidence that comes from that. or that view is a certain kind of confidence. But confidence is a tricky concept because we also are well advised to seek difficult challenges, things that push us to the limit, right? That push us so far that we're not fully confident that we're going to succeed, right?
Right.
In fact, we all love to read stories and go to movies that tell a story that has an ending that's not obvious, right? Is the hero going to succeed or not? And the hero has a degree of confidence that he's seeking, even choosing to seek that success, right? That takes a lot of confidence right away, right? To play in the arena,
Right.
right? To fight in the arena. But the courageous man, the hero, is not certain that he's going to succeed. So in that sense, he doesn't have confidence in all degrees. Oh, there's a phone. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But there's a certain thing he is confident in, right? He's confident in his morality. He's got self-esteem, right? He knows that he's worthy of success and that he's capable, and he's got the courage to seek that, even though he's not sure that he's going to succeed in this case because the challenges are so great, right? Yeah. There may be forces marshaled against him, right? And he's got to hold his values so deeply that even the chance of succeeding is enough. Even if he were to fail, he still thinks the pursuit was worth it.
Yeah.
So there is confidence, but there's also uncertainty. It does not mean, oh, I know, I'm so confident that I know I'm gonna succeed, right?
Yes.
So it's an interesting balance and an interesting tension. One of my really excellent acting teachers one time handed out a piece of paper with a bunch of passages about great actors who lacked confidence. And they cashed in on that. They tell a story, I don't know whether it's true, that Laurence Olivier used to throw up before performances. I remember hearing that Bill Russell, one of the greatest basketball players ever, who won, I think, 8 world, championships in a row with the Boston Celtics, right? It might have been 8 in a row. That's pretty unbelievable.
I don't know your statistics, no.
And I've heard it said that he threw up before every single game he ever played. And there was a passage about Meryl Streep, the actress, who said that every time she's handed a new script, she says to herself, "This is the time my public is going to realize that I cannot act." This script, this role is going to show that. and Robert De Niro have like all of icons of great actors go into a new challenge fearing that they're going to fail and fail terribly. And sure enough, that's just what the character is probably feeling,
Right.
right? and you know, the essence of drama is conflict.
Mm.
You know, and so the character, the hero, he's facing conflict. What should I do? What should I do? And he doesn't know whether he's going to succeed. He doesn't even know what to do until the climax. That's when he figures out, oh, this is the way this is the solution to the problem. I'm going to do this. But then you have it play out, and it may or may not live. He might die in the next 10 minutes. So, the only time the person is comfortable in a dramatic work is in the last minute.
Yeah.
And if it lasts more than a minute, it's boring. So the actor goes through 2 hours of stress to the hilt.
Right.
So we have to be clear on what we mean by confidence.
Right. Well, I like the way you focused on the fact that confidence could be tricky as well. But the point that this relates in terms of marriage, from my perspective, is that marriage is not just union of two people, of man and a wife, because they bring in their families as an extended circle of their spectrum of activity, even without the children, right? So when you get married, you're not just celebrating the love of your life, but now you are embracing all the things that she values. And part of those things is her family. And these are complete strangers to you. You don't know these guys. You didn't sign up for that.
You did not meet your wife's parents before you got married?
Of course I did. But this is
they sized you up, I bet.
exactly, right? So the feminine side is very judgmental. Right? So it's as progressing in the offspring as it is investigating and exploring the past, that what exactly shaped this woman to be the woman that I'm falling in love with, right? She has a baggage. She has a dowry that I have to explore, I have to understand, and I have to appreciate. And so that pedigree resonates in one's character, and you cannot ignore it. It has all kinds of repercussions in one's stand on life and understanding of life. So it's as personal as it becomes public. And so making it public, standing firm on your conviction, and showing the confidence that you can handle it helps. Even if you have to throw up before you say that, or stand up with a confident face, right?
So when you saw your wife's mother, did you say, this is what my wife is going to be like in 25 years?
I didn't explicitly reference it that way, but I'll give you one anecdote. So in my household, my family nickname was like Hotel Benlian, because we always had strangers staying at our place. My mom always cooked every day for at least an extra person or two. And my father always brought more than one or two people extra.
Uh,
So we always entertained. My mom was always working extra. We always
and they
had
enjoyed that. It was not a
loved it.
burden.
Yeah,
They liked it.
they loved it.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I was curious to find out about the love of my life is when I first went to visit, were there going to be other people there? Because this was unannounced visit. This was just like
Oh,
we're going to go in and you're going to meet them. And then I go and I see like another hotel, like laughing, all friends and stuff. They're playing cards and, the food on the table and, everybody's interacting with each other. So it was a very social party kind of a scene, very benevolent, very friendly. And,
mhm,
oh, yeah, this is our daughter's friend and introduced to everybody. So I knew exactly where she's coming from. So it was
mhm,
very much like my environment if she had seen my scene at my home. Uh,
mhm,
so I said, in that regard, I know what to expect, right? So she has the same understanding of life that I have in that sense,
mhm,
um, through her family. But um, and and I think those social interactions help you build that confidence that there will be people that you may disagree with and there'll be people that you agree with, but it gives you more confidence of interacting with more people because you have exposure to more people, right?
mhm.
And you have more experience in that sense. So yeah, I mean, marriage is very complicated, and so there is a biological component to it, right? It's like we're coupling two different sets of DNAs of two different environments, two different locations, histories, and there's a lot going in. Um, and so integration is definitely a process that has to be appreciated in that union, and
Mhm.
it's very much philosophical, very much psychological, and and social, and political, and cultural, and it's very very important. So I mean, in general, I think we touched on enough generalities and stuff, but I think uh, it's good enough to convey that this is an important issue, should be taken seriously, should be defended. And
Mhm.
again, I'll say to everybody who listens to check out your book, Masculine Power, Feminine Beauty, the volitional objective basis for heterosexuality in romantic love and marriage. Because in the book, it's in a book format you get much more than you can get from our conversation here, no matter how much we
Oh yeah,
um, so it'll be more valuable to the listener to read the book and get more out of it, and then hopefully have questions or comments for you.
that's
uh,
right. An interview to me is more like a sketch,
yeah,
and the book is more like the painting.
yeah, yeah.
So
And you did a great job. So, but thank you again for coming on and talking about
thank you,
this.
Arshak.
And if you, if you don't want to say anything else, we can draw a line here and look forward to another discussion with you. I'm very curious and looking forward to reading your article that you mentioned. You were drafting an article on abortion. I'm sure
Hmm.
that's going to be interesting. and it will be
Hmm.
worth discussing. So whenever
Yeah.
you finish, if you're willing, I'll be happy to have you to discuss that.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. Well, thank you again, Ron, for your wisdom, for your time, and always pleasure to talk to you.
Same with you, Arshak. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for having me.
Have a great one. Bye bye.
You too. Bye for now.